Thank you all again for joining us for this webinar on how the answers on your LPL application impact your firm's insurance, premium, and coverage. These webinars are hosted by your trusted advisor, Renee Krause, the president of Lawyers Choice. As a former practicing attorney and an expert in the LPL insurance industry, Renee understands the full spectrum of how to protect a law firm, and she works relentlessly to determine the needs of each client and ensures they receive the most comprehensive coverage at the very lowest premium possible. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Krause.
Thank you, Heather. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our second installment in our LPL Basics webinar series. Today, we're jumping into the basics of an application. And my hope is that we can provide very valuable, useful information that you can start implementing in your firms as you look at your applications and go through your renewals. A couple notes, I will spend about 20 minutes on content. We'll have Q&A at the end for about 10. You are welcome to submit your questions via the chat section whenever you have them, and we'll just address at the end. Also, everybody is anonymous, so you're welcome to ask any question and know that we will not know who you are or what firm you're with. So without further ado, we'll get started. Okay, the basics of an LPL application. Really, as I'm sure most of you know from dealing with these over time, that the applications are similar, but they're never exactly the same. So what we've done today is break up into sections what the components that every one of these applications has. And there's 6 components that you'll find in every LPL application. That would be your firm's information, your current insurance information, your areas of practice, your attorney roster, your risk management systems, and finally, your claims information. So those categories will be addressed in every application just differently depending on each carrier. Carriers input your information into underwriting software, which produces credits or debits to their system's base rate. But what you need to know is the underwriter who reviews your application, their job is to develop and maintain a profitable book of business for the carrier. So as they evaluate the information that you put on the application, they're trying to ascertain whether you're a good fit for that carrier's program and whether they want your business. So please know that every question, as maybe innocuous as it may seem, it actually does tie to some aspect of underwriting, and it's real important that you answer them. Also, just an important thing to know, some of you may know this, some may not, but carriers also take a look at, they do their own research outside of the application. So when you provide information on the application, they will then, take a look at your website. They'll search your firm's name. They'll find out as much as they can outside of the application to learn more about you, to help them underwrite. So you may know that carriers have discretionary credits they can use on any premium, and they can apply a discount if they feel that the firm is worthy of that or merits that. So they'll use that. They'll research your firm to find that out, but they'll also research to confirm information. So they will take a look at state records for disciplinary actions. They'll take a look at your website to make sure that the information that you post to the public is consistent with what you're putting on the application that they're reviewing. So those are just some of the basic components of the application. Okay, this is the firm information section, and this seems very basic, but believe it or not, everything here ties to some aspect of your rate. So the name of the firm, that section, name, address, website, you want to include any DBAs that you're doing business under, along with the entity's name, the address, city, state, and county. That, believe it or not, affects rate in that different counties and states are rated differently. So you could have one firm that is identical to another firm in Grand Junction, Colorado, for example, which is a smaller town outside of, outside of the state, and you have the same firm in Denver, Colorado, the firm in Denver, Colorado would have a much higher, or a higher rate, not necessarily much higher, but a higher premium, because it's based on loss experience, not only with the type of firm that an underwriter is looking at, but also the location. So geography matters, and know that that's, an element of underwriting. The website is, as I said, where they'll go to look for more information. Make sure that the information you've put on your application, like your attorney roster, is looks the same as it does on your website. And then they'll also ask about your predecessor firms. This is a section that can be a little confusing because it really is addressing two changes a firm may go through with respect to their name. So one is very simple. It's just a name change. That means that, partners come and go and there's been no merger or acquisition. The firm is just changing their name and updating to reflect who they are now. So you would complete this information because you want that name to be captured on the application so that in an event of a claim, that previous firm's name would be covered under the current firm's identity. So you want to always include the other incarnations of the firm. And if there's been no merger, you can just put NA in that section. So, and the date would really reflect not the established date of the new firm, but the name change date. So important to include any of that if it's relevant. If your firm has never had a name change and never had a merger with another firm, you would not need to address that here. Okay, continuing with the firm information, number of non-attorney employees, payroll, revenue, and financial procedures. So something to know about these questions, the underwriter here is trying to determine if your firm is in line with ratios that are what they consider normal for what they want to underwrite. So when they're asking number of non-attorney employees, they're comparing that to the number of attorneys that a firm may have to make sure that the ratio is in alignment. So for example, if an underwriter sees that there's 3 attorneys and 40 non-attorney employees, well, that is strange. And it could be indicative of maybe those non-attorney employees maybe actually doing legal work. An example would be a collection firm. So they would want to make sure that they kind of get a look into how the firm is structured to understand that better. Payroll and revenue, they want that to be consistent, of course, with the number of attorneys and non-employee attorneys that a firm may have, and the area of practice. So, there's some consistencies they'll see in analyzing firms all over the country with respect to payroll and revenue. And that information that you provide allows them to see if it makes sense to them with what they've seen before. Now, a couple of things to note. You can see a shift sometimes in your revenue. For example, a personal injury firm who has a normal revenue number, but then settled a very big case and it spikes for the next year. That should not concern you because there's an explanation for it. So never be afraid to disclose information on these applications that maybe you're thinking, oh, if I disclose that could hurt our rate. It really just means you'll have to provide a little additional information. And if it makes sense, it's not going to do anything to increase your rate. So that's the reason for those questions. Now, percentage of the applicant's firm's receivables current over 90 days. We answered this application 3%. That's typically the tolerance that most carriers will have. So they don't really like to see more. Over 5% is probably the most we'll see that they find acceptable. The concern there is that if you are not collecting your fees in a timely fashion, then there may be a management issue. There could be a potential for maybe fee suits in the future, which might produce a retaliatory malpractice claim. So this is very preliminary, but they're just trying to get a sense of how are you managing your firm from the business side of things. And then, okay. Current insurance information. So this section is where they're going to ask you, you're going to provide your current limits of liability, your deductible, retroactive date, premium, and insurance history. Now, this is important for the carrier to know, what are you at now? You can always ask for different limits than what you have now, but they want to make sure if they're quoting your coverage, that they know if you have had insurance in the past or not. They want to know your retroactive date or your prior acts date, so they can make sure to match that on any quotes, so that if you do decide to move to a different carrier, that the coverage you have under your current carrier is matched and you don't lose any coverage when you make the move. They want to know your deductible, premium. And the premium is often a place where we'll find a reluctance to answer that question. There is a perception that if you provide that information, somehow your premium the premium you get from the carrier may not be the best premium they could have offered, because they're trying to scale it to be just better than what you have now. But that's not true. The reason I ask that question is they can speed the underwriting process up when they get here to say, wow, given what we're seeing, the premium you have is much higher than we can offer. They'll be motivated to move quickly and offer you great terms and a lower premium, because they feel like they've got a good chance of winning your business. Conversely, if they see a premium that's very low and they know they can not ever approach that rate, they can shut it down at that point and decline, and they'll call it declining. They can't be competitive. So it's really valuable to provide that information. It doesn't change anything. They have underwriting guidelines. They have rating software. As I mentioned, there is some discretionary credit allowed, but it's about 3%, so it's not tremendous. So just know that everything that you can answer on the application really does help the underwriter give you the most favorable rate possible. Okay, I know this is a common section. It's areas of practice. So this is tied into the underwriter's appetite for types of firms that they want to insure. Everyone's a little different, and what is not preferred for one carrier could be exactly what they're looking for. So on areas of practice, a few notes here. What you want to, well, the first bullet point is, why do these categories differ between carriers and applications? It's tied to what they're looking for. So when you see everything you do on their area of practice roster, on your area of practice grid, that's a good sign that this carrier likes firms like yours, because it's real easy to complete the information. If you're not seeing what you do on that area of practice roster, you may not be with the right carrier. And a tip here is also to make sure when you complete this, round to a whole number. Carriers don't like to see 0.02% or 0.075. They prefer a whole number. If it doesn't amount to a whole number, you can always combine that, maybe 5%. If you look on the right column at the bottom, there's a section that says other, and you can put 3% miscellaneous, and a few notes would be helpful. But when you break it down too much, it's actually more complicated for them to underwrite, and they want to see a whole number. Also, important to note that they are asking about the past year. So don't be proactive in the way you answer this question. Don't think about what areas of practice are we planning on engaging in next year. Keep it to what have we done in the past, and know that you are not obligated to only practice in these areas that you indicate. If after you place your coverage, you engage in some other areas of practice, it's completely fine. And you will indicate that, or you will provide notice of that on the following year's application, and that may impact your rate. So for the purposes of what you're doing at renewal, you want to keep it to what you did last year, and round the whole numbers. And finally, high risk versus low risk areas of practice. I've on this slide, I've bolded the areas that tend to be higher risk. So it's bankruptcy, financial institutions, bonds, securities work, class action plaintiff, and so on. Those will tend to generate a higher rate for most firms. And if you do those areas of practice or engage in that, perfectly fine. But be clear that you understand what that means. Sometimes we'll see someone describing really what is just private company activity as securities work, and it's really not. And calling it securities work can increase the premium substantially. So if you're ever confused about, I'm not sure if I can call it that, before you put it on your application, call your agent. If you're working directly with the carrier, call the carrier and ask for a little clarification on what it is they're looking for. Because you do want to be very accurate on this. This is a big part of where your rate comes from. Okay, attorney roster. So pretty simple here. They're looking for the attorney count. Most programs have a limitation on how many attorneys they can have in their program. So it'll be maybe 1 to 5, or they can go 1 to 10. Some carriers only want to work with firms that have 20 or more attorneys. So this is how they figure that out. And they'll ask the name, designation, hours worked, bar admit date, and the date they joined the firm. And so what's important to note here is hours worked per week is important. And often we'll find that our clients maybe have been answering the application in a certain way for years and kind of don't pay attention to this. But if a firm, in 9 times out of 10, if an attorney is working 20 hours or less per week for the firm, they will not be charged the full rate, and they may not be charged any rate at all, even though they are included and covered in the application and the policy. So real important to make sure that you're describing that accurately, because it can make a big difference in your rate. Also, the date the attorney joined the firm is important, because that's their individual prior act date. So that's the date from which the work they engage in becomes covered under your firm's policy. Important to have that accurate. And then let's see, designation. So again, carriers designation doesn't really impact rate much. It really gives a glimpse into how you're structured. So if it's got 2 or 3 partners, a couple OCs, and then a couple associates or employed attorneys, great. If everybody's a partner, or if everybody's an employee, or everyone's an OC, it's not necessarily negative, but it may produce additional questions from the underwriter that you might have to answer. So this is on this section. Oh, one more comment. On the total number of attorneys this year versus last, you'll see that question is common because it's a way for them to see if there's been a big change in the firm in the past year. So if a firm has doubled in size, that looks like a merger or an acquisition. If half the attorneys have left, that means maybe something went wrong. They would want to know, why has there been such a big change? So again, they're trying to assess risk, and anything they can find out on the application that would illuminate the history and nature of your firm is going to be helpful. Okay, risk management systems. This is a real important place to gain brownie points and reduce your rate. So docket and calendaring systems, you want to have at least 2, and if they can be computerized or electronic, that's better. Carriers really want to see an aggressive docket management system, because that really is a source of claims. So if you can show that you've got that under control, they feel more comfortable offering you a better rate. Engagement letters. Carriers love to see the use of engagement letters and what they want to see in those. And by the way, if I mention anything here that you want to see more of, we have loads of samples that we're happy to share. You can also probably go to your own carrier, and they have a website that you can download and see what they like to see, which is great. But in the engagement letter, they want to see a clear statement of the parties, the scope of representation, the fees, the services that you're providing for the firm. So as comprehensive as you can be in that, and using those regularly all the time is great. That helps reduce the rate. And then termination letters, which some of our clients think that means when you fire, they fire one of their clients, but really it means a conclusion of the matter of which you are providing services for the client. So carriers love it if you use just a letter saying, thank you for allowing us to represent you in XYZ matter, and this is now being concluded. No further activity will be engaged in on behalf of you in this matter, and we look forward to serving you in the future. So they like to see a nice, tidy black and white line. Services begin here, services end there. So, if you don't have that, we can provide that for you, but you get a lot of, credits when you use things like this. And then of course, CLE credits, keeping those up to date, important. Shared office space. They ask about that because they want to make sure if you are sharing space with another attorney or law firm, that they are truly separate from you, and that you're not sharing databases or client information or risk management systems. They'll also ask about fee suits. That's really important. Generally speaking, carriers don't want to see more than 3 suits for fees, i.e. 3 suits wherein you sue a client for non-payment of fees for services you have provided to them. They don't like to see more than 3. More than that is a concern in that it is indicative of maybe your billing system isn't being handled very well, or your client communication isn't well, or there's something that could lead to a claim. So they'll always ask about that. And, if you can keep it to 3, great. But candidly, some areas of practice simply necessitate more fee suits. Family law is a great example. In family law practices, often a client will not pay all the fee. And then it becomes part of the practice that you do send them to collections and you do collect fees. And, you don't want to sacrifice revenue necessarily to produce the best rate. And you can have a fee suit. You can sue clients for fees. The carrier may just add an exclusion for any claims that arise out of that, which could be fine if you're making sure to really clear the file, vet it, audit it before you pursue any fee suits. Maybe let the statute of limitations run on a malpractice claim before you initiate that. There's no problem. So they're asking questions, but it doesn't mean you cannot do certain things if you're doing them and they make sense for your firm. And then finally, business ownership. Most carriers will have a limitation within the policy that allows for up to 10% ownership in a client who is up to 10% ownership by an attorney or member of the firm in a company that is also a client of the firm. Beyond that, there may be coverage. It would just have to be added on by endorsement. And the reason for that is that there's a potential conflict of interest if you say own 50% of a client. That client's also, or that company is also a client of your firm. So then that company sues your firm, you could actually benefit from a bad act because you are also an owner of the client who is suing the firm. So that's why they ask that question. But again, it doesn't preclude you from having that. They just want to know about it. Okay, claims and disciplinary actions. This is always scary for firms because they really worry about how important that is. And of course it's important, but what's the impact it's going to have on their rate? So the key here is that you want to be very forthcoming when you answer these questions, claims and disciplinary actions. Just explain it and provide any information that you feel can add to, obviously, your story being favorable. Something to avoid, though, and we see it a lot, is when a carrier is asking for claims information, try not to send the complaint and the answer and all of the motions that went along with the claim and ask them to sort through a 50-page document, because they won't. What they're looking for is a very simple explanation that talks about what gave rise to the claim, what was the nature of the claim, and did the claim have merit? And if so, what steps have been taken by the firm to prevent that from happening again? So really short and sweet. With respect to claims and mostly claims, there's 2 types that carriers care about based on their underwriting. One is the frequency issue, and one is severity. So some carriers have no problem with number of claims as long as none of the claims have been very expensive. So if you have 2 or 3 $5,000 claims, not a big deal for one carrier, maybe for another carrier, no way. Conversely, severity. Severity is when you've never had a claim, but you have one claim that pays out. Some carriers are very comfortable with just one claim, and others are absolutely not going to touch it. So just know that carriers have different appetites. So the application is helping them learn about you and see if it's going to be a good fit. So feel free to be candid about that. And also on the claims, something that we get on an application, for example, if you've had a claim and it was meritless and it was shut down quickly, it didn't cost any money, there will always be the question, what has your firm done to make sure you take preventive measures to make sure this claim doesn't happen again? And we'll see the answer, nothing, because we did nothing wrong, which is true, but is not helpful on the application to getting you the rate that you'd like to get. So what you always want to know is, from the carrier's perspective, if any claim is made, even meritless, something was wrong, right? Maybe it's a matter of vetting your clients better and determining, digging deeper into what they're seeking before you agree to take on the representation. Maybe it's including approval of 2 attorneys before any matter is taken on. Maybe it's a remedial measure might be increasing the communication we have with our clients. Whatever it is, you need to put an answer there, because saying, because we didn't actually commit malpractice, we're not going to do anything differently, doesn't help you. So just keep that in mind. You can put down anything. We audit our books more frequently, we audit our client files more frequently, and we reach out, we're proactive. Whatever that may be, give the underwriter a good reason to give you a little bit of a credit on that question, even if there was a claim. And then at the end of the application, you'll always have a warranty statement. And that's simply saying that, to the best of our knowledge, everything we have included here is truthful. Okay, so application tips. These are just some overall helpful things that really get you a better rate. 1, keep it neat and easy to read. Underwriters are looking at hundreds of files, and if yours looks really put together, they get excited about diving into it and offering a rate. Don't skip questions. We've talked about that a little bit. Keep in mind, there's no central information housing system for your firm's information, but carriers do keep any information they've seen in the past. So if your application has come before them in years past, they'll know about that. Always include 5 years of claims information if you've had a claim. And when you're unsure what a question means, ask your agent for clarity. Don't ever guess on a question. And also keep in mind, you can augment and add additional information when you're completing your application. So you can add an attachment if you want to more fully explain a question. So I know we only have about 3 minutes left for questions. Applications are a lot. So if you can stay on a moment or two longer, we'll get through all the questions. If not, you can go ahead and log off, because this is being recorded, and we'll make sure to send everyone who participated today a copy. So with that, I will turn it back to Heather for any questions.
Okay, so our first question: why do I need to provide previous claim information for an attorney that's joining my firm now?
Okay, so that's a great question, because logically speaking, if that happened before they joined my firm, why do I have to give any information related to it? It wouldn't be covered under my firm's policy. But it does go to the risk that that attorney may be bringing to your firm. So they want to know about that, because they want to ask more questions. It's as if you had the claim, in as far as the information they want to know about it goes, not as far as it impacts rate. So they also want to make sure that any matter that attorney was involved in has been closed, so that there's no possible way that your firm can be involved in any matter that's going on right now. Again, can't say enough. Information is information. It can be explained. An underwriter can become very comfortable with a situation if there's a good reason behind it. So, but that's why they ask that information.
Okay, our next question: what is the benefit of working with a broker versus shopping with the carriers?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, obviously, if you're working with a broker will have access to many carriers. If you work directly with a carrier, you're only going to hear about that carrier's product, right? But the other big important thing to know is, when you work directly with a carrier, the agent that you're speaking with that's employed by the carrier, their duty of loyalty is to the carrier, not to the insured. So any information you're sharing with them, they're going to share that with the carrier. Answers they give, which aren't going to be, what do I want to say, dishonest or anything, but they're going to just be with respect to the carrier's interest. When you work with a broker, the broker's duty of loyalty lies with the client or the law firm. So you can feel free to share information, questions about a potential claim, knowing that nothing gets delivered or provided to the carrier without your permission. So it's a nice thing to know. It's really just a matter of how do you want to be treated when you're seeking your coverage, and to know, how what you're saying and to whom does matter.
Okay. If an attorney is a trustee of a family trust and plays an active role in that trust, but a judicial branch oversees and approves trust management, how much does this play into the premium?
It's not, okay, that is not really a premium question because that activity is really housed under family law or estate planning law, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So if you're a fiduciary to a trust or maybe with respect to some aspect of a family law issue, it's underwriting as far as what is that carrier's threshold or tolerance for that area of practice. But that specific activity is not a rate increasing activity. Participating as a fiduciary is not a problem because it's part of a bigger aspect of the firm's area of practice. For example, estate planning, that's part of estate planning. If the carrier is comfortable with it, the carrier is comfortable with it. So it's kind of a small carve out, but most every policy does provide coverage for fiduciary activities.
Okay, we still have a lot of questions. Let's just do this one. What do I do if I have an attorney taking the bar, but I will not have the results back prior to my renewal?
Great question. And if they're not licensed and they're not admitted, they're not an attorney yet, you do not put them on the application on the roster. What you do is once they have passed the bar, become admitted and are now functioning as an attorney for your firm, you send notice of that to your carrier at that time. 9 times out of 10, there is no additional premium charged for adding an attorney during the policy period. That would be determined at renewal. So if you renew your policy 2 months later, you have an attorney who was a clerk, and now they're, they were a clerk non-admitted, and now they are admitted. You give notice to your carrier. You will not be charged for that attorney until 10 months later when you renew the policy.
Do you want to keep going?
Sure, I'll stay on another 5 minutes, and we'll try to get through all the questions. If you have to leave, I'm going to answer your question, and you'll see that in the recording.
Okay. Do I need to include a previously reported potential claim on my application with a new carrier?
No, not a potential claim. Not a previously reported potential claim. So, well, let me think about that for a second. Potential claim. If I heard it right, it said if it was the potential claim already reported to the other carrier, then yes. So if you are filling out an application for a carrier, a new carrier that you're considering moving to, and you had a potential claim that was sent to another carrier, that carrier will consider it a claim and it will be reported on your loss run. However, it would show inactivity, it would show zero amount spent. But from the carrier's perspective, even though it's potential, once you tell the carrier about it, they classify it as a claim, and then they will split it up as to whether it's an active claim, inactive claim. They'll set loss reserves amounts, which would probably be zero if they think it's not going to be anything, but it is there and it does need to be disclosed on the new carrier's application.
All right, next question. Will we get in trouble if I do not include an area of practice that is listed on my website?
Trouble. That's a broad way to ask it, but no, that really depends on the underwriter. So as I mentioned, they do their own research, and often what a firm will do is, they'll say on the application is asking, what did I do last year, right? And you put that down and that's an accurate statement, but your website may be talking about business you would like to draw to the firm. So the fact that they are not completely in alignment may have a very good reason, and that would be one of them. So no, you don't get into trouble. And the application has the warranty statement, and you say to the best of your knowledge at the end, everything I've said here is accurate and true. It's accurate and true. So no, some carriers though do take issue if it's on your website, you're advertising an area of practice they are absolutely not going to take on, and they may decline for that reason. So, but no, you don't get into trouble. There's no consequence other than the carrier may say, hey, we don't want to insure firms that do that work. So you can either take that off your website and not try to seek that area of work for your firm, or you can, we won't offer you quotes, but there's no trouble for that.
What if I do not see an area of practice on my application?
Well, if you don't see your area of practice on your application, it's probably a good sign the carrier is not interested in writing firms who have that area of practice. But it doesn't mean that 100% of the time. There'll always be a section that says other. And maybe you're doing, for example, cannabis work, right? Cannabis companies, that is not necessarily on applications because it's so new, and it doesn't mean the carrier will not consider it, although most won't, but some will. There may be some other very, Indian law. You don't often see that on an application, but the carriers may be interested in underwriting it anyway. So there's a section where it says other, and you can always include any other areas that you engage in that you don't see on the area of practice grid.
Why are disciplinary actions a bigger deal than claims?
Good question. And that seems contrary, right? Because a disciplinary action never results in a monetary or award or damages, award, whereas a claim may. But the problem is if an attorney is disciplined by a regulatory committee within their state, that's a bigger problem than a claim, in that it's indicative of something was actually done that violated, professional rules of responsibility or some aspect of the practice. That may be a flag that this attorney is not one that the carrier would want to underwrite. There are, but that's not the full answer. There are some things that happen that are describable, and explanations can satisfy the underwriter, but they do tend to weigh a disciplinary action heavier than a malpractice claim.
Okay, and final question, why do I need to include last year's revenue?
The reason for that is, I kind of touched on that earlier, but that's the basis upon which they can evaluate whether or not your firm is operating within ratios, within constructs normal for a firm like yours. So, for example, if you have a real spike in revenue from one year to the next, they might want to know why. And you have a great explanation, no problem there. Maybe it's not that you had a big case payout, but you took on a very lucrative area of practice. So they're just trying to make sure that there's consistency in the firm. They don't like to see big spikes, like last year was 1 million, this year is 3, 2 years ago was 4. They like to see a little bit of consistency. It's indicative of how the firm is managed, and that helps them know if you're a risk they want to underwrite. So, wow, we went almost 10 minutes over. I'm sorry, but I'm very happy for the people that stayed on. I can certainly take more questions if you have them. Please, I think what I'll do is, well, I don't know who sent them, but if you have other questions, you're welcome to email me. Heather will send that information to you and I can answer those, or you can call me and I'll be happy to address those with you directly. Thank you so much for joining us. This was, I hope, very helpful. It's such an important part that a lot of people don't give a lot of attention to, because I know you all think it's a big pain, but it really does matter. So thank you so much. We're excited to have you join us for our 3rd installment. And that's where we dig into extended reporting period, AKA tail policy options. That's a big source of questions. And what we're going to talk about in that is, when do you need them? How do they work? How long of an ERP do you need? How much do they cost? All of that will be answered in our 3rd installment. So thank you so much. And until next time, have a great day.